Dear finance professionals and students, welcome to podcast of FCA Deepak Rao, a practicing chartered accountant. Weekly digest for week 4 of April 2025. India's automobile exports surged by 19% to over 53 lakh units in fiscal year 2024-25, fueled by strong demand for passenger vehicles, two-wheelers, and commercial vehicles in international markets. Passenger vehicle shipments rose by 15%, driven by global models manufactured in India, while two-wheeler exports increased by 21% due to new models and market expansion. India plans to amend its nuclear liability laws, capping accident penalties for equipment suppliers to attract US firms like GE and Westinghouse. This move aims to boost nuclear power production to 100 gigawatts by 2047 and facilitate a $500 billion trade deal with the US. The changes address concerns stemming from the 2010 law influenced by the Bhopal disaster. The Accounting Standards Board or ASB of ICAI has released an exposure draft proposing amendments to Ind AS 109 and Ind AS 107 aimed at contracts for electricity generation from natural sources like solar and wind. The draft provides clarity on how such contracts should be accounted for, allowing their inclusion in hedge accounting. It also introduces enhanced disclosure requirements covering cash flow impacts, financial risks, and assessment of losses. Companies may apply the changes retrospectively but aren't required to restate past reports unless feasible without hindsight. Public comments are open until May 18, 2025, with implementation proposed from April 1, 2026. The CBIC has issued revised guidelines to streamline the GST registration process. Officers are directed to only request documents specified in Form GST REG 01 and avoid any irrelevant or presumptive queries. Specific instructions have been outlined for verifying the principal place of business, including owned, rented, shared, or SEZ premises. When it comes to verifying the constitution of the business, only essential documents such as the partnership deed or registration certificate need to be submitted. SEBI has released a consultation paper on investments by mutual funds in REITs and InvITs. It has proposed raising investment limits for mutual funds in REITs and InvITs. As per current norms, mutual funds can invest up to 10% of a scheme's net asset value in REITs and InvITs with a cap of 5% in a single issuer. The proposal recommends raising single issuer limit to 10% and overall exposure to 20% for equity and hybrid schemes. However, debt schemes will retain 10% investment limit. Banks and non-banking financial companies may incur higher compliance costs if the Reserve Bank of India's draft guidelines on gold loans are implemented in their current form. According to the draft guidelines, banks and NBFCs need to adopt standardized documentation across all branches. Moreover, gold financiers have to establish proper collection and calculation methods preventing any deviation. The Mumbai Bankruptcy Court dismissed an insolvency petition against Dentsu Communication India due to a lack of evidence supporting the operational debt. The NCLT raised concerns about potential fraudulent transactions involving former employees and third-party vendors. Rohit Plastopak's application, alleging a default of Rs 5.42 crore, was rejected as they failed to prove the delivery of goods. Toshiba Transmission will invest Rs 562 crore to expand its manufacturing in Telangana, generating over 250 jobs in 3 years. The agreement with the Telangana government aims to boost local employment and skills. This investment scales up transformer production for domestic use and exports, aligning with Make in India and strengthening Toshiba's presence as a global T&D hub. Real estate leads AIF investments with a 15% share, totaling Rs 73,903 crore out of Rs 5,06,196 crore. AIFs have emerged as vital for real estate financing, addressing funding gaps and offering high reward opportunities. The sector has witnessed substantial growth, with the number of AIFs increasing 36-fold in the last decade, driven mainly by Category 2 AIFs. In a significant relief to charitable and religious institutions, the Income Tax Department has now enabled the filing of condonation requests through Form 10AB on the e-filing portal. The amendment empowers the Principal Commissioner or Commissioner of Income Tax to condone the delay in furnishing Form 10A for registration or approval under Section 12A, provided there is reasonable cause. This move aims to benefit trusts and institutions that miss the prescribed timelines for filing Form 10A and were at risk of losing their tax-exempt status. In a significant clarification aimed at fostering ease of doing business, the Income Tax Department reiterated that DPIIT recognized startups are eligible for multiple tax exemptions and investments made in such companies are not subject to scrutiny, provided certain conditions are fulfilled. Responding to a tweet on social media platform X, the department confirmed that startups recognized by the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade or DPIIT and those that filed the necessary Form 2 declaration are entitled to the benefits under the Income Tax Act 1961. Private equity and venture capital investments in India totaled $3.7 billion across 284 deals in the first quarter of calendar year 2025, marking a 14% decline in deal value and a 20% decline in deal volume from the same period last year. The slowdown comes amid growing investor caution, driven by macroeconomic headwinds yet to play out in the private markets. India's leading passenger vehicle and two-wheeler manufacturers experienced market share declines in financial year 25, reaching multi-year lows due to increased competition. Maruti Suzuki and Hyundai shares in the PV segment fell to 12-year lows, while Hero MotoCorp share also dropped significantly. Mahindra & Mahindra and Toyota Kirloskar bucked the trend, posting gains amid sluggish market conditions. The Reserve Bank of India's revised liquidity coverage ratio norms are projected to unlock Rs 2.7 to Rs 3 lakh crore for banks, boosting lending capacity. This move aims to balance liquidity and profitability, mitigating risks from online withdrawals with a reduced runoff factor. Experts believe banks may adjust deposit strategies, favoring short-term deposits, while the framework supports credit growth potential. In a move aimed at expanding the tax base and ensuring better traceability of high-value transactions, the Central Board of Direct Taxes has issued a notification amending the Income Tax Rules 1962. The amendment, published as the Income Tax 11th Amendment Rules 2025, mandates the collection of tax at source on the sale of several luxury and collectible items under Section 206C of the Income Tax Act 1961. Saudi Arabia and India agreed to deepen energy ties and pursue closer cooperation in areas like tourism and technology as the countries seek to strengthen relations at a time of turbulence for the global economy. An accord was reached to establish 2 oil refineries in India through a joint venture between the countries. Almost 3 years after it surprised the telecom industry by entering the 5G spectrum auctions, the Adani Group is exiting its only telecom spectrum holding by selling it to Bharti Airtel. In a deal announced on Tuesday, Bharti Airtel and its subsidiary Bharti Hexacom have entered into definitive agreements to acquire rights to use 400 MHz of spectrum in the 26 GHz band from Adani Enterprises owned Adani Data Networks. BlueSmart has appointed Grant Thornton to conduct the audit amid concerns over a significant cash discrepancy as the EV ride-hailing firm faces scrutiny following whistleblower complaints alleging financial irregularities. The company, struggling with a high cash burn and amid trouble at sister concern Gemsol Engineering, has suspended services. JSW Paints and a consortium of Advent International and Indigo Paints are vying to acquire Akzo Nobel India, the owner of Dulux Paints, as Akzo Nobel NV seeks to exit the Indian market amidst intense competition. Pidilite Industries is also interested primarily in Akzo's decorative business. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of India will investigate Gensol Engineering and BlueSmart Mobility's financial year 24 financial statements and audit reports due to fraud allegations. This action follows a Securities and Exchange Board of India probe that revealed fund diversions and governance issues, promoting concerns about auditor accountability and financial reporting practices. The scramble for marquee audit mandates has begun as India Inc. enters the final stretch of the 10-year mandatory rotation cycle introduced under the Companies Act in 2017-18, with several companies beginning discussions to onboard new auditors for the next decade. Between 2018 and 2023, audit fees for FTSE 250 companies rose by 75%, reflecting rising costs and complexity. In contrast, India's NSE 500 saw only a 25% increase during the same period, despite operating in a high inflation, high growth environment. Also, this time around, companies are triggering a far more structured and competitive process than a decade back. Personal relationships no longer drive decisions. Formal RFPs are fast becoming the norm. The Reserve Bank of India has revised guidelines under the Basel III Liquidity Coverage Ratio framework, increasing runoff rates for retail deposits enabled with internet and mobile banking facilities, updating the treatment for deposits from non-financial small business customers, and aligning the valuation of government securities with haircuts applicable under the Liquidity Adjustment Facility and Marginal Standing Facility. The amendments will be effective from 1st April 2026. The RBI has issued final guidelines revising the liquidity coverage ratio framework, adjusting haircuts on the market value of government securities, and introducing additional runoff rates of 2.5% to internet and mobile banking enabled retail and small business customer deposits. In addition, the final guidelines also rationalize the composition of wholesale funding from other legal entities. The revised instructions shall become applicable with effect from 1st April 2026. The Reserve Bank of India has revised its guidelines on opening an operation in the deposit accounts of minors. Now, minors of any age may be allowed to open and operate savings and term deposit accounts through his or her natural or legal guardian. Further, minors aged 10 years and above may independently open and operate savings or term deposit accounts subject to limits and terms set by banks based on their risk management policies, which must be duly communicated to the account holder. Peak 15's 2.85 billion eighth fund under the Sequoia Capital was announced in 2022 for investing in venture, growth and Southeast Asia. Of the total pool, $2 billion was earmarked for India investments, while the remaining was for Southeast Asia. In 2024, the VC firm downsized this fund by 16%, with the bulk of the reduction coming in its growth stage allocation. Hindalco Industries has launched a Rs 500 crore EV component manufacturing plant in Chakan, Pune to meet the rising demand for lightweight battery solutions. They also delivered 10,000 aluminium battery enclosures to M&M Limited. The enclosures offer a 40% weight reduction and improved driving range by 8 to 10%, aligning with the Make in India vision and creating 1,000 jobs. A listed company sought informal guidance on whether preferential allottees must make an open offer disclosure under Regulation 3, Subsection 2 of the Takeover Regulations upon converting CCDs and CCPS into equity shares. The conversion would result in a 0.96% reduction in shareholding for financial year 2026-27. SEBI clarified that since the conversion would not increase the shareholding of the promoter and its group by 5% and would reduce it, preferential allottees are not required to make an open offer. The RBI has revised its directions on the compounding of contraventions under FEMA 1999. The earlier provision that linked the compounding amount payable to a previous compounding order has been reviewed. Now, each application will be treated as a fresh one, and the compounding amount will no longer be linked to any earlier compounding orders. Further, to avoid delays, applicants must now share more details like mobile number, payment office, etc. with their payment. SEBI has announced a change in cutoff timings to determine the net asset value or NAV for repurchase or redemption of units in overnight schemes of mutual funds. Accordingly, for applications received up to 3 p.m., the closing NAV of the day immediately preceding the next business day will apply. For applications received after 3 p.m., the closing NAV of the next business day will apply. If an application is received online, the cutoff time of 7 p.m. will apply for schemes. RBI has instructed all banks to migrate their websites to the new secure domain .bank.in by October 31st, 2025. This initiative is aimed at strengthening the cybersecurity framework and enhancing public confidence in digital banking and payment systems. The migration will be managed by the Institute for Development and Research in Banking Technology under aegis of Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. The Supreme Court on Friday said the Reserve Bank of India and banks can proceed afresh against big defaulters even as it set aside orders of various high courts that quashed criminal proceeding initiated against such borrowers and also stalled actions taken by the lenders for declaring their accounts as frauds. The court clarified that quashing administrative actions doesn't prevent authorities from initiating fresh action. Indian GCCs face recruitment challenges due to a talent gap in specialized skills and increased talent mobility towards newer centers offering better packages. The younger workforce seeks purposeful work and dynamic environments, promoting GCCs to adapt their strategies. Remote work's popularity and expansion into Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities further complicate talent acquisition, necessitating innovative employee-centric approaches to win the talent war. SEBI has shortlisted 9 firms including Deloitte, BDO and Choksi for conducting forensic audits of listed companies, reducing the panel size from 20. The selection, valid for 3 years, prioritizes firms with proven experience and quality work in past assignments, aiming for a more focused approach to sensitive fraud investigations. Deloitte is the only Big Four audit firm in the list. KPMG, EY and PwC are not in the list. While KPMG and EY were part of the previous panel, PwC was not. Other firms selected are BDO, Choksi, CNK and Associates, Jain Chaudhary and Co., Pawan Puri and Associates, Raju and Prasad, Rajvanshi and Associates, and ATK and Associates. Among these, BDO, Choksi, Rajvanshi and Associates, and Deloitte have been selected for a second time. SEBI has released comprehensive FAQs updated as of April 23, 2025 to clarify the SEBI LODR Regulations 2015. The FAQs cover new secretarial audit norms, mandatory disclosures including forensic audits and BRSR core, and minimum public shareholding norms. They also address the applicability of related party definitions, financial results formats, ESG assurance scope, and shareholding pattern requirements. SEBI has notified the SEBI Real Estate Investment Trusts Amendment Regulations 2025. A new Schedule 3A titled Mandatory Disclosures in Scheme of a Document has been inserted. It mandates disclosures such as SM REIT's name, address, registration status, principal place of business, contact number, website, details of the parties involved, background of SM REIT, details of the offer, etc. Further, the responsibilities of trustees in Regulation 9 have been enhanced. Ather, the Bengaluru-based electric two-wheeler maker, allocated 41.7 million equity shares to 36 anchor investors at Rs 321 apiece, including a share premium of Rs 320 per share. SBI, Custody Bank of Japan, Aditya Birla Sun Life Insurance, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, Invesco, Franklin Templeton, ICICI Prudential, Morgan Stanley and Societe Generale among others participated in the anchor round. This podcast is sponsored by Sound of CA. We share because we care. Vande Mataram, Jai Hind.